The broken glass dug deep into Amara's bare knee, but she did not dare cry out. The dirty floor of the VIP room was sticky with spilled whiskey and blood. Outside the thick windows, the Chicago winter howled, throwing hard, freezing snow against the glass. Inside, it was too hot, smelling like cheap cigars and sweat. "You stupid bitch!" her Uncle Marcus screamed. His heavy hand swung down, slapping the side of her face so hard her ears rang. Amara fell sideways, her cheek hitting the sticky floor. She gasped for air, tasting copper in her mouth. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. She kept her eyes on the floor, staring at the shattered pieces of the expensive crystal glass she had dropped. "My hands were wet. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" Marcus grabbed a fistful of her thick, dark hair and pulled her head back. Amara let out a sharp cry of pain. "That glass cost more than your worthless life. I give you a place to sleep. I hide you from the law, and this is how you pay me back, making me look like a damn fool in front of my guests. Please, Uncle Marcus, I'll clean it. I'll work double shifts." She was crying now, hot tears mixing with the blood on her lip. She knew what was coming next. He used the same threat every time she messed up. "You think I won't do it?" Marcus hissed, pulling her hair tighter. "I will call ICE right now. I will have them drag your undocumented ass out into the snow and send you back to nothing. You have no papers. You have nobody. You belong to me." Amara squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the next hit, but it did not come. "Let her go." The voice was low, rough like gravel, and quiet, but it cut through the room like a sharp knife. Marcus froze. He let go of Amara's hair and stepped back quickly, suddenly looking very small. Amara slowly looked up. Sitting in the dark corner of the room on a wide leather couch was a man she had never seen before. He did not look like the usual loud, messy men her uncle did business with. He wore a dark, perfectly fitted suit. His face was hard, carved out of stone, with deep lines around his mouth and silver hair at his temples. He was much older than her, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s, but he moved with the slow, scary grace of a predator. His dark eyes locked onto Amara. There was no pity in them, just cold, empty calculation. "Mr. Choi," Marcus stuttered, his hands shaking as he wiped sweat from his forehead. "I am so sorry about this mess. The girl is clumsy. She's useless. I will get someone else to clean it." Choi Tae-yoon leaned forward, resting his heavy hands on his cane. The silver handle caught the dim light. "I do not care about the glass," he said slowly. "How much for her?" Marcus blinked, totally confused. "Excuse me." "The girl," Tae-yoon repeated. His thick accent made the words sound even harder. "I want her. I am buying her from you tonight." Amara's heart stopped. The room started to spin. She looked from her uncle's greedy face to the cold, old man in the corner. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She had just become a thing to be sold. If you are enjoying the video so far, please leave a like. It really helps the algorithm push more videos like this to your feed so we can keep giving you the best dark romance stories. Also, let us know down in the comments where you are watching from tonight, or rate this story from 1 to 10. But listen closely. If you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you might leave Amara alone in this room to be dragged away by her abusive uncle, or worse, completely handed over to a cold-blooded monster. Don't be the reason she loses her only chance at survival. Subscribe now, and let's get back to the story. Marcus let out a nervous, ugly laugh. He rubbed his hands together. "You want to buy Amara? Mr. Choi, I don't run that kind of business. She just cleans." Tae-yoon did not smile. He did not even blink. He raised 2 fingers in the air. From the shadows behind him, a massive Korean man in a tight suit stepped forward. The man reached inside his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the glass table. It landed with a heavy thud. 50,000, Tae-yoon said. "Cash, that covers the broken glass and her life. You will never look for her. You will forget she ever lived in your rat-infested building. Do we have a deal?" Marcus stared at the envelope. His eyes got wide. $50,000. It was more money than he made in a whole year running his dirty underground games. Amara pushed herself up to her knees. Her whole body was shaking. "No," Amara whispered. She looked up at her uncle. "Uncle Marcus, please. You can't do this. I'm your brother's daughter. You can't just sell me to a stranger." Marcus did not even look at her. He reached out and grabbed the envelope, ripping the top open. He saw the thick stacks of $100 bills and a sick smile spread across his face. "She's all yours, Mr. Choi. Good luck with her. She cries too damn much." "No," Amara screamed. She tried to stand up, ignoring the shooting pain in her cut knee. She backed away toward the door. "I won't go. I'm not a slave. You can't just buy me." Tae-yoon stood up. He was tall, blocking the dim light of the room. He leaned on his cane and walked slowly toward her. His heavy footsteps echoed on the wood floor. When he was right in front of her, Amara could smell him. He smelled like expensive wood, dark coffee, and gunmetal. "You will stop screaming," Tae-yoon said softly. His voice was completely flat. "If you scream again, I will let my man shoot your uncle in the head. Then I will leave you here with his dead body for the cops to find. And since you have no papers, you will take the fall for his murder. Do you understand?" Amara clamped her hands over her mouth. Her chest went up and down as she took fast, panicked breaths. Tears rolled down her dark skin. She stared into his black eyes and saw that he was not joking. He would do it. He would kill her uncle and ruin her life without even thinking about it. She nodded slowly. "Good," Tae-yoon said. He looked over his shoulder at his massive bodyguard. "Jin, get her coat." Jin walked over to a hook on the wall and pulled down Amara's thin, cheap winter coat. He tossed it at her. She caught it with shaking hands. "Put it on," Tae-yoon ordered. "We are leaving." Amara slipped her arms into the coat. She did not look at Marcus as she walked past him. She knew her uncle was already counting the money, totally happy to be rid of her. She followed Tae-yoon out of the VIP room and down the dark, dirty hallway of the club. Drunk men and tired women stared at them as they passed, but no one said a word. Everyone knew who Choi Tae-yoon was. No one messed with the head of the Korean syndicate. When Jin pushed open the heavy metal back door, the Chicago winter hit Amara like a solid wall. The wind howled loudly, throwing freezing snow into her eyes. The cold bit into the cut on her knee. She hugged her thin coat tightly around her body, shivering violently. In the dark alley, two massive black SUVs were waiting, their engines running, blowing thick white smoke into the cold air. Jin opened the back door of the first car. Tae-yoon climbed in smoothly, despite his cane. Jin looked at Amara and pointed to the open door. "Get in." Amara looked down the dark alley. The street was empty. The snow was piling up fast. She thought about running. She could just take off into the dark. But she had no money, no phone, no ID. If the freezing cold didn't kill her tonight, the police would find her, and ICE would deport her to a country she barely remembered. She had no choice. She took a deep breath of the freezing air and climbed into the back seat of the SUV. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The car was incredibly warm. The soft leather seats felt like butter. The windows were tinted so dark she could barely see the street lights outside. Tae-yoon sat next to her, staring straight ahead as the car started to move smoothly over the snow. For a long time, the only sound in the car was the soft hum of the heater. Amara sat pressed against the car door, trying to make herself as small as possible. She wrapped her arms around her stomach. Her knee throbbed with pain, and a thin line of blood ran down her leg, staining her cheap white sock. Tae-yoon reached into a small compartment between the seats. He pulled out a clean, white handkerchief and held it out to her without looking at her. "Wipe the blood," he said. "You are making a mess on my seats." Amara took the cloth with trembling fingers. She pressed it against her cut knee. It stung badly, but she bit her lip to stay quiet. She stole a glance at the man sitting next to her. Up close, the lines on his face were deeper. He looked tired, but in a scary, powerful way. He had the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you can destroy anyone in the room. "Why did you buy me?" Amara whispered. Her voice was scratchy from crying. "I don't know anything about your business. I'm just a maid. If you want someone to clean your house, you could hire a real cleaning service. You didn't have to give him $50,000. Tae-yoon finally turned his head to look at her. His dark eyes moved over her face, her messy hair, her bruised cheek from where Marcus had hit her. He did not look at her with lust. He looked at her like a farmer looking at a piece of land he just bought. "I did not buy you to clean my house," Tae-yoon said. His voice was perfectly steady. "I have plenty of people who do that. I bought you for a very specific job." Amara's stomach turned to ice. She knew what men did with women they bought. "I won't be your whore," she said, her voice shaking but angry. "I'll kill myself first. I swear to God I will." Tae-yoon let out a short, cold laugh. It was a harsh sound. Don't flatter yourself, little girl. I am not looking for a whore. I can buy 100 beautiful women who actually know how to please a man. You are skinny, you are scared, and you are bleeding on my seats. You are not here for my pleasure. Amara frowned, confused and still terrified. Then why? Tae-yoon leaned his head back against the leather seat. He stared at the ceiling of the car for a long moment before answering. I am 52 years old. I have built an empire in this city. I own the docks. I own the politicians. I own the streets. But my enemies have started to whisper behind my back. They laugh because I have no heir. They think when I die, my bloodline dies with me, and they will easily take everything I built. He turned his head slowly, locking his terrifying eyes with hers. My late wife could not give me children. She was weak, Tae-yoon said, his voice dropping lower, colder. But you are young. You are strong enough to take a beating and still stand up. You have no family to look for you and no papers to run away with. You belong entirely to me now. Amara stopped breathing. Her mind could not process the words. What are you saying? I am saying, Tae-yoon replied, leaning slightly closer so she could smell the danger on him, that you are going to give me a son. You will carry my child and you will secure my legacy. If you do this quietly, I will give you a life of luxury. You will never be cold or hungry again, but if you try to run or if you fight me. He reached out slowly. Amara flinched, but he only touched the bruised skin on her cheek with the back of his cold knuckles. I will show you that your Uncle Marcus was a very kind man compared to me. Do we understand each other, Amara? Amara stared into the face of the monster who just bought her womb. She was trapped. Trapped in a speeding car in the freezing snow, sold to an old, barren mafia boss who wanted to use her to prove a point to his enemies. She squeezed the bloody handkerchief in her hand, shut her eyes, and let the tears fall in the dark. The heavy tires of the SUV rolled through the thick Chicago snow, the only sound in the dead quiet of the car. Amara kept her face turned toward the dark, tinted window. She pressed the bloody white cloth tight against her knee. The pain was a sharp, hot burn, but it gave her something to focus on besides the terrifying man sitting inches away from her. She was trying not to make a sound, but every time the car hit a bump, a small gasp escaped her lips. Tae-yoon did not look at her again. He pulled a sleek black phone from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The bright screen lit up his rough, lined face, making the silver hair at his temples shine. He pressed a button and held the phone to his ear. When he spoke, it was in rapid, deep Korean. Amara did not understand a single word, but the tone made her shiver. It was cold, full of absolute authority. He sounded like a man ordering someone's death while deciding what to eat for dinner. He did not sound like a man who had just bought a human being for $50,000. To him, she was just another piece of business. Just a tool to get the baby he wanted. Amara hugged her cheap, thin coat tighter around her chest. The heater in the car was blowing warm air, but she felt like she was freezing from the inside out. Her mind raced, trying to find a way out. She had no money. Her uncle had sold her out. If she ran into the winter storm, she would freeze to death before morning. If she went to the police, she would be deported to a country she left when she was 3 years old. She had no family there. She did not even speak the language properly anymore. She was completely trapped. Damn it, she whispered to herself, the tears falling hot and fast down her cheeks. She wiped them away angrily with the back of her hand, smearing a little bit of her own blood onto her face. Tae-yoon finished his call and dropped the phone back into his pocket. He turned his head slowly, his dark, empty eyes locking onto her shaking shoulders. Tears will not change anything, Tae-yoon said. His rough voice filled the quiet car. You are wasting your energy. You will need your strength. You are crazy, Amara choked out. She didn't know where the bravery came from, maybe just pure panic. You can't just force someone to have a baby. It's sick. I am 22 years old. You are old enough to be my father. Tae-yoon's face did not change. He did not look angry and he did not look insulted. He just stared at her with that same cold calculation. Age does not matter in my world. Power matters, money matters, survival matters. My enemies are waiting for me to get weak. They are waiting for me to die so they can take my territory. A son changes that. A son proves my bloodline is strong. You will give me that son. I won't, she said, her voice shaking. I'll fight you every single time. Tae-yoon leaned closer to her. The smell of his dark coffee and expensive cologne wrapped around her. You think you are the first person to tell me no? he asked softly. I have broken men twice your size. I have made them beg for their lives on their knees. You are a frightened little girl who jumps when a door slams. You will not fight me, Amara. You will do exactly as you are told because you want to live. And right now, I am the only reason you are breathing. He leaned back into his seat, looking straight ahead again. Amara squeezed her eyes shut. She knew he was telling the truth. He was a monster, and he had total control over her. The SUV finally slowed down. Outside the window, Amara saw massive iron gates rising up in the dark. A guard in a thick winter coat stepped out of a small brick booth and waved the car through. The gates swung open smoothly. The car drove up a long, winding driveway lined with tall, dead trees covered in thick snow. At the end of the driveway sat a huge stone mansion. It looked like a castle, dark and heavy, with a few warm lights glowing in the giant windows. It was miles away from the dirty, loud city streets Amara was used to. It was totally isolated. No one would ever hear her scream out here. The car stopped near the front steps. Jin, the giant bodyguard, got out of the front seat and opened Tae-yoon's door. The freezing wind immediately rushed into the car. Tae-yoon stepped out into the snow, leaning heavily on his silver-handled cane. He did not wait for her. He started walking up the stone steps toward the massive front doors. Jin walked around to Amara's side and pulled her door open. He stood there, a mountain of a man, staring down at her. Out, he grunted. Amara slowly slid across the leather seat. When her bare feet hit the icy ground, she gasped. She had lost her cheap sneakers somewhere in the club when Marcus was dragging her. The snow burned her skin like fire. Her injured knee sent a shooting pain all the way up her leg. She stumbled and almost fell face first into the snow, but Jin grabbed her by the back of her coat, holding her up like she was a stray dog. Walk, Jin ordered, letting go of her. Amara limped up the stone steps, her teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. The front doors opened before Tae-yoon even reached them. A tall, thin older woman stood in the doorway. She wore a dark gray dress that looked like a uniform, and her black hair was pulled back into a tight, perfect bun. Her face was sharp, with high cheekbones and eyes that looked just as cold as Tae-yoon's. Welcome home, Mr. Choi, the woman said, bowing deeply. Tae-yoon walked past her into the house. Mrs. Kang, this is the girl. Amara limped into the massive hallway. The floor was made of shiny black marble. A giant crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, throwing bright, harsh light everywhere. It was completely silent inside. It felt more like a museum than a home. Amara stood dripping melted snow and blood onto the perfect floor, shivering uncontrollably. Mrs. Kang stood up straight and looked Amara up and down. Her nose wrinkled in disgust. She looked at Amara's messy, thick hair, her cheap, dirty coat, and the blood running down her bare leg. She is filthy, sir, Mrs. Kang said in clear, sharp English, and she is bleeding on the marble. Have her cleaned, Tae-yoon commanded, not even turning around to look at Amara. He kept walking toward a set of heavy wooden doors at the end of the hall. Burn those clothes. Call Dr. Park to fix her leg. Put her in the East Wing guest room and lock the door. Yes, Mr. Choi, Mrs. Kang replied. Tae-yoon opened the wooden doors and stepped into a dark room, shutting the doors firmly behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the massive hallway. Amara was left standing alone with the strict housekeeper and the giant bodyguard. Mrs. Kang stepped closer to Amara. You smell like cheap liquor and garbage, she said plainly. Follow me. If you bleed on the carpets upstairs, I will make you scrub it out with a toothbrush. Amara didn't have the energy to talk back. The pain in her knee was making her dizzy, and the shock of the night was finally hitting her hard. She just nodded slowly and followed Mrs. Kang toward a grand, winding staircase. Every step up the stairs was torture. Her foot left little wet, red footprints on the dark wood. They walked down a long, wide hallway with soft, thick carpet. There were paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in an art gallery. Mrs. Kang opened a white door at the very end of the hall and walked inside. Amara limped in behind her. The bedroom was massive. It was bigger than Amara's entire apartment back in the city. There was a huge bed in the center with thick white blankets, a fireplace, and a large window looking out into the dark, snowy woods. But there was no warmth in the room. It felt completely empty. The bathroom is through there, Mrs. Kang said, pointing to a door. Take off those disgusting clothes. Get in the shower. Use the soap. When you are clean, put on the robe hanging on the door and wait on the bed. The doctor will be here in 10 minutes. I don't need a doctor, Amara whispered, her voice barely working. I just want to go home. Mrs. Kang stopped and looked at Amara. Her sharp eyes narrowed. You do not have a home anymore. You belong to Mr. Choi now. That is a fact you need to accept very quickly if you want to make your life easy here. Do you understand me? Amara looked down at her bleeding leg. He wants me to have his baby, because he thinks I'm just some nobody he can use. You are a nobody, Mrs. Kang said coldly. But if you give him a son, you will be the mother of the future boss. That is more power than a street rat like you could ever dream of. Now, go wash. You are wasting my time. Mrs. Kang turned and walked out of the room. The heavy door shut with a loud click. Then, Amara heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. She rushed to the door and grabbed the handle, pulling on it. It wouldn't move. She hit the wood with her fist. Hey, she yelled, her voice breaking. Open the door, please. Nobody answered. The house was dead quiet again. Amara slowly backed away from the door. She looked around the giant, empty room. She was locked in. She walked into the huge, shining bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror over the sink. Her dark skin was pale from the cold. Her right cheek was swollen and turning purple where her uncle had hit her. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She looked pathetic. She stripped off her wet, dirty coat and threw it on the floor. She took off her cheap t-shirt and her torn jeans. She turned on the hot water in the shower and stepped inside. The hot water hit her cold skin and felt like needles. When the water ran over her cut knee, she gasped and grabbed the wall, holding her breath to keep from screaming. She watched the pink water swirl down the drain, taking the dirt and the blood with it. She stood under the water for a long time, letting the heat sink into her bones. She thought about her Uncle Marcus sitting in his dirty club, counting the $50,000. She thought about Tae-yoon's cold, empty eyes telling her she was going to give him a son. She felt sick to her stomach. She felt like an animal in a cage waiting to be bred. When she finally turned off the water, she dried herself with a huge, soft towel. She put on the white silk robe hanging on the door. It was way too big for her, slipping off her thin shoulders. She limped back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the giant bed. 10 minutes later, the lock clicked and the door opened. A tired-looking Korean man carrying a black leather medical bag walked in. Mrs. Kang stood in the doorway behind him, her arms crossed over her chest. I am Dr. Park, the man said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. He didn't make eye contact with Amara. He walked over to the bed and pulled up a chair. Show me the leg. Amara pulled the white silk robe up past her knee. The cut was deep, still oozing dark blood. Dr. Park opened his bag and pulled out a bottle of clear liquid and a piece of cotton. This will burn, he said. He pressed the wet cotton into the cut. Amara hissed, digging her fingers tight into the soft mattress. Tears pricked her eyes again. Please, Amara whispered, looking at the top of the doctor's head. Please, sir, you have to help me. I didn't want to come here. He bought me from my uncle. I don't want to do what he wants. Can you just let me use your phone? I can call a friend. I can get out of here. Dr. Park's hands stopped moving for 1 second. He took a deep breath, but he did not look up at her. He pulled a needle and a thin black thread out of his bag. Hold still, he said softly. You need 5 stitches. Did you hear me? Amara begged, her voice cracking. She looked at Mrs. Kang in the doorway, but the older woman just stared at her with a blank face. Please, I am a person. You can't just let him do this to me. Dr. Park pushed the needle through her skin. Amara cried out, grabbing the bedsheets. I hear nothing, Dr. Park whispered, keeping his eyes entirely on his work. I see nothing. I only fix what is broken. If you want to survive in this house, little girl, you will learn to do the same. Never ask me for a phone again. Mr. Choi hears everything. Amara stopped talking. The fight slowly drained out of her chest, leaving her feeling completely hollow. She sat perfectly still while the doctor stitched her skin back together, biting the inside of her cheek until she tasted fresh blood. She stared blankly at the dark window, listening to the Chicago wind howl against the glass, realizing she was entirely, hopelessly alone. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, and the lock turned with a loud, final sound. Amara was completely alone again. She sat on the edge of the massive, soft bed, pulling the oversized white silk robe tighter around her freezing shoulders. Her right knee throbbed with a hot, sharp pain where Dr. Park had put the 5 black stitches. She looked down at the neat, dark thread pulling her skin together and felt a sick feeling rise in her throat. She was trapped in a cage. It was a beautiful, expensive cage, but it was still a cage. She stood up slowly, putting her weight on her good leg, and limped over to the giant window. The glass was thick and freezing to the touch. Outside, the Chicago winter was completely wild. The wind threw heavy sheets of snow against the window panes, making a loud, scary howling noise. Down below, the ground was pure white and completely flat. There were no footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of life. Just a dark line of dead, frozen trees way off in the distance. Even if she could break the thick glass and survive the fall from the second floor, she would freeze to death in the snow in less than an hour. Tae-yoon knew that. That was why he didn't even bother to tie her up. Amara rested her forehead against the cold glass. "Fuck," she whispered, her breath making a small cloud of fog on the window. "Fuck, fuck, fuck." She wrapped her arms around her stomach, pressing hard. The thought of that old, terrifying man putting his hands on her made her want to throw up. He wanted a son. He wanted to use her body like a machine to build his twisted legacy. She remembered the empty, dead look in his dark eyes when he told her she belonged to him. He was a monster who did not care about her pain, her fear, or her life. He only cared about his power. She turned away from the window and limped back to the bed. She crawled under the thick, heavy blankets, curling her body into a tight ball. She did not sleep. She lay there in the dark for hours, listening to the wind and watching the shadows move across the high ceiling. Every time the old house made a creaking sound, her heart jumped into her throat, expecting the door to open and Tae-yoon to walk in. If you are enjoying this dark, twisted journey, please leave a like on the video. It tells the algorithm to push more intense romance stories to your feed so you never miss out. Also, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from today, or rate this episode from 1 to 10. But listen to me carefully. If you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you might be the reason Amara gives up completely. You might leave her alone in this freezing room to have her spirit broken by a ruthless mafia boss. Don't let her fight this battle alone. Subscribe right now, and let's get back into the story. The harsh, bright light of the morning sun finally broke through the gray clouds and filled the room. Amara's eyes were dry and burning. She had stayed awake the entire night, jumping at every tiny noise. Her knee felt stiff and tight, but the sharp pain had turned into a dull, heavy ache. A loud click echoed through the room. Amara shot up in the bed, pulling the thick white blanket up to her chin. The heavy door swung open, and Mrs. Kang walked in. The older woman looked exactly the same as she had the night before. Her dark gray dress was perfectly ironed, and her black hair was pulled tight into a bun. She carried a stack of folded clothes over her arm and a pair of soft gray slippers in her hand. She did not look at Amara with any kindness. "Get up," Mrs. Kang ordered, her voice sharp and clear. She walked over to the end of the bed and dropped the clothes on the mattress. "Mr. Choi is waiting for you in the dining room. You have 10 minutes to get dressed and come downstairs." Amara looked at the clothes. It was a pair of thick, black sweatpants and a soft, oversized gray wool sweater. It was not a maid's uniform, and it was not the kind of fancy, revealing clothes she thought a mafia boss would make a woman wear. It just looked warm. "I'm not hungry," Amara said. Her voice sounded scratchy and weak. Mrs. Kang stopped and stared at her. Her dark eyes narrowed into cold little slits. "I did not ask if you were hungry. I said Mr. Choi is waiting for you. When the boss tells you to sit at his table, you sit at his table. If you want to play games and be stubborn, he will send Jin up here to drag you down by your hair. Do you want that?" Amara swallowed hard. She remembered the giant, silent bodyguard who had tossed her into the car. She slowly shook her head. "Good," Mrs. Kang said, turning toward the door. 10 minutes. Turn left when you reach the bottom of the stairs. Do not make him wait." Mrs. Kang walked out, leaving the door wide open. Amara threw the blanket off and carefully swung her legs over the side of the bed. She took off the silk robe and pulled on the black sweatpants, wincing when the fabric brushed against her stitches. She pulled the heavy wool sweater over her head. It was huge on her, falling all the way down to her thighs, but it was incredibly warm. She slipped her bare feet into the gray slippers. She walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her right cheek was still swollen, turning a dark, ugly shade of purple and yellow. She looked like a complete wreck. Taking a deep breath, Amara walked out of the bedroom. The hallway was completely silent. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of her footsteps as she limped toward the grand staircase. The house was too quiet. It felt like a museum, not a place where people actually lived. As she slowly made her way down the wooden stairs, holding tightly to the railing, she saw two men standing by the front doors. They wore dark suits and had earpieces in their ears. They did not even look at her as she reached the bottom of the stairs. She turned left, just like Mrs. King had told her. She walked down a wide, bright hallway with giant windows that looked out over the snowy front yard. At the end of the hall, a set of double doors was pushed wide open. Amara walked into the dining room and stopped. The room was massive. A long, dark wooden table stretched across the center, big enough to seat 20 people easily. Above the table hung another giant crystal chandelier. At the very end of the table, sitting with his back to a roaring stone fireplace, was Choi Tae-yoon. He was not wearing a suit today. He wore a dark, fitted turtleneck sweater that made his broad shoulders look even wider. He had a pair of reading glasses resting on the bridge of his nose, and he was quietly reading a thick newspaper. A cup of black coffee steamed on the table next to him. He looked perfectly calm, like an ordinary rich man enjoying a quiet winter morning. But Amara knew exactly what he was. Jin stood in the corner of the room, his arms crossed over his massive chest, watching Amara like a hawk. Tae-yoon did not look up from his newspaper. "Sit down," he said. His rough, gravelly voice echoed in the large room. Amara slowly walked toward the table. She pulled out a heavy wooden chair near the middle of the table, keeping as much distance between them as she could. She sat down carefully, keeping her bad leg straight. The table in front of her was completely empty. Tae-yoon turned a page of his newspaper. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Your uncle called me this morning," he said casually, not taking his eyes off the paper. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She leaned forward slightly. "Uncle Marcus, what did he say? Did he change his mind? Is he giving the money back?" Tae-yoon let out a short, cold laugh. He folded the newspaper neatly and took off his glasses, placing them on the table. He finally looked at her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "He did not call to give the money back. He called to ask if I wanted to buy your passport and your old birth certificate for an extra $5,000. He told me he found them hidden in his basement." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands gripped the edge of the wooden table. "He sold my papers." "Yes," Tae-yoon said smoothly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn green booklet. He tossed it onto the long table. It slid across the smooth wood and stopped right in front of Amara. She stared at it. It was her old Nigerian passport, the only proof that she actually existed in the world. "You have nothing left out there," Tae-yoon said. His voice was flat, totally empty of emotion. "Your own blood sold you for cash and then tried to squeeze me for more. You are dead to the world, Amara. The only place you exist now is inside this house." "You are a sick, evil man," Amara spit out. Her hands were shaking with pure anger. "You think you can just buy my whole life? You think you own me because you gave a piece of shit like Marcus some money." Jin took a sudden, angry step forward from the corner, his face turning red. But Tae-yoon simply held up one hand. Jin stopped instantly and stepped back into the shadows. "I do not think I own you," Tae-yoon said softly, leaning back in his chair. "I know I own you, and you should be grateful. If I had not walked into that room last night, he would have called immigration. You would be sitting in a holding cell right now, waiting to be shipped back to a place you do not even know. Instead, you are sitting in a warm house, wearing clean clothes and eating my food." "I haven't eaten anything," Amara snapped back, crossing her arms over her chest. "And I don't want anything from you. I just want to leave." Tae-yoon stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then, he pressed a small button hidden under the edge of the table. A few seconds later, a side door opened, and Mrs. Kang walked in carrying a silver tray. She walked over to Amara and set down a plate of hot eggs, thick bacon, and buttered toast. She also placed a glass of orange juice next to it before bowing quickly to Tae-yoon and leaving the room. The smell of the food hit Amara's nose, and her stomach completely betrayed her. It let out a loud, hungry rumble. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday morning, but she forced herself to look away from the plate, staring hard at the dark wood of the table. "Eat," Tae-yoon commanded. No, Amara said stubbornly. Tae-yoon sighed. It was a tired, annoyed sound like a father dealing with a stupid child. He picked up his coffee cup and took a slow sip. If you do not eat, you will get weak. If you get weak, you will get sick. And if you get sick, you cannot carry my child. I will not let you ruin my investment because you want to throw a tantrum. I am not an investment, Amara yelled. She hit the table with her open hand, making her plate rattle. I am a human being. Why are you doing this to me? You are rich. You are powerful. You could have any woman in the city. You could find a woman who actually wants to marry you and have your babies. Why buy a maid who hates you? Tae-yoon placed his coffee cup back on the saucer with a sharp clink. The calmness in his face suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying intensity that made the air in the room feel heavy. He leaned forward, resting his thick forearms on the table. Because a woman in my world comes with strings, Tae-yoon said, his voice dropping an octave, sounding like pure gravel. If I take a wife from another syndicate family, her father will want a piece of my docks. Her brothers will want a piece of my casinos. If she gives me a son, they will try to use the boy to control me. They will smile in my face and plot to poison my drink. He pointed a thick finger at her. You have no family, he continued, his eyes drilling into her soul. You have no father with a gun. You have no brothers waiting in the shadows. You have no money, no friends, and no power. You are a completely clean slate. When you give me a son, he will be mine and mine alone. There will be no one to contest my claim, no one to use him against me. Amara stared at him, feeling a deep, terrifying chill run down her spine. He had thought about this. He had planned this perfectly. He didn't just buy her because she was pretty or because he felt sorry for her. He bought her because she was entirely, hopelessly weak. She was the perfect victim for his plan. What if I can't? Amara whispered, her voice breaking. What if I can't get pregnant? What happens to me then? Tae-yoon's face went completely blank again. He picked up his newspaper. Then you will be of no use to me, and I do not keep useless things in my house. He did not explain what that meant, but the threat hung in the air, heavy and dark. Amara looked down at the hot food on her plate. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to hide them under the table. She realized right then that she was fighting a war she had already lost. If she starved herself, he would just force-feed her. If she ran, his men would drag her back. Her only choice was to survive. And to survive, she needed to be strong. Slowly, with her head down, Amara picked up the silver fork. She took a small bite of the eggs. It tasted like ashes in her mouth, but she chewed it anyway. She forced herself to swallow. Good, Tae-yoon said softly from the end of the table, not looking up from his paper. You are learning. We will begin tonight. Amara froze, the fork stopping halfway to her mouth. Her blood ran completely cold. She looked up at him in pure horror. Tonight. Yes, Tae-yoon said calmly, turning another page of the newspaper. I am an old man, Amara. I do not have time to waste. You will rest today. You will eat everything on that plate. And tonight, you will come to my room. The heavy silence in the dining room pressed down on Amara like a physical weight. The word tonight echoed in her brain over and over until it made her dizzy. She stared at Choi Tae-yoon, hoping to see a crack in his stone-cold face, maybe a hint that this was all some sick, twisted joke. But he simply turned another page of his newspaper, totally relaxed. To him, tonight was just another business meeting. Another box to check off to keep his power secure. Amara looked back down at her plate. Her stomach rolled, but she forced herself to pick up the fork again. She stabbed a piece of bacon, put it in her mouth, and chewed. It tasted like cardboard. She swallowed it down with a sip of cold orange juice. She had to survive. If she was weak, she was useless, and Tae-yoon had just told her what happens to useless things in his house. She ate every single bite on the plate, her hands shaking the entire time. When she was done, Tae-yoon stood up, grabbed his silver-handled cane, and walked out of the room without looking at her again. The rest of the day dragged on like a slow, painful nightmare. Mrs. Kang locked Amara back in the big, cold guest room. Outside, the Chicago winter got worse. The sky turned dark gray by 4 in the afternoon, and the wind screamed against the thick glass windows. Amara paced the floor. She walked back and forth from the fireplace to the bed, biting her fingernails down to the skin. Her mind raced with desperate plans. Maybe she could break a glass and use the sharp edge to threaten him. No, Jin would shoot her before she even got close. Maybe she could tie the bedsheets together and climb out the window. No, she would freeze in the snow with her busted knee. There was no way out. She was completely trapped. By 7 o'clock, the heavy lock on the door clicked. Amara froze in the middle of the room. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Mrs. Kang walked in. She carried a single, thin piece of black silk draped over her arm. She walked over to the bed and laid it down flat. It was a nightgown. It was barely a piece of clothing at all. It was completely sheer, with tiny, thin straps. "Wash yourself again," Mrs. Kang said. Her voice was flat and annoyed, like she was talking to a dirty stray cat. "Use the scented oil in the glass bottle on the counter. Make sure your hair is dry. Put this on, nothing else." "It's freezing in this house," Amara whispered, wrapping her arms around her oversized wool sweater. "I'll freeze to death in that." Mrs. Kang gave her a hard, cold look. "The master suite has a fire. You will not be cold for long. You have 30 minutes. If I have to come back in here and dress you myself, you will regret it." Mrs. Kang left, leaving the door cracked open just an inch. That was a warning. It meant her time as a guest was officially over. Amara walked over to the bed and picked up the black silk. It weighed absolutely nothing in her hands. She felt a hot tear slide down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. Crying wasn't going to save her. Cussing wasn't going to save her. She had to do exactly what he wanted, or he would destroy her. She walked into the bathroom, stripped off her warm clothes, and got into the shower. She scrubbed her dark skin until it turned red, trying to wash away the smell of her uncle's dirty club and the cheap life she used to live. She rubbed the expensive, heavy rose oil into her skin, feeling sick to her stomach at how sweet and soft she smelled. This was the smell of a sacrifice. She dried her thick hair and slipped the black nightgown over her head. It fell to her mid-thigh, clinging tightly to her curves. It hid absolutely nothing. She looked at herself in the mirror. The ugly purple and yellow bruise on her cheek looked terrible against the expensive silk. Her right knee was swollen and wrapped in a white bandage. She looked exactly like what she was, a broken thing that had been bought with dirty cash. Exactly 30 minutes later, the bedroom door opened completely. Mrs. Kang stood waiting in the dark hallway. Amara took a deep, shaky breath, letting the freezing air of the house hit her bare skin. She stepped out of the room. Her bare feet made no sound on the thick carpet. "Follow me," Mrs. Kang said. They walked in complete silence. The house was massive and incredibly dark. Only a few small lamps burned on the walls, throwing long, scary shadows across the floor. They walked past dozens of empty rooms, turning down a long corridor in the west wing of the mansion. At the very end of the hall stood a pair of massive, dark oak doors. They looked heavy enough to lock away a monster. Mrs. Kang stopped in front of the doors. She did not look at Amara. She just pointed a thin finger at the brass handle. "Go inside. Do not speak unless he speaks to you. Do not cry. Do exactly what you're told." Amara swallowed the thick lump of fear in her throat. She reached out with a trembling hand and grabbed the cold brass handle. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. Behind her, Mrs. Kang pulled the door shut. The lock clicked heavily. There was no going back. If the tension is making your heart race, make sure to leave a like right now. It tells the algorithm to push more intense, gritty romance audiobooks directly to your feed. Drop a comment and let us know what you would do if you were in Amara's shoes, and tell us what city you are listening from tonight. But pay attention. If you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you are leaving Amara completely alone behind locked doors with a ruthless mafia boss. Don't let her face this nightmare without you. Subscribe to the channel, and let's find out what happens behind those heavy oak doors. The master suite was the size of an entire apartment. It was incredibly warm. A massive stone fireplace took up an entire wall, blazing with thick logs that cracked and hissed in the quiet room. The smell of burning wood, rich leather, and dark whiskey hung heavy in the air. Choi Tae-yoon sat in a large leather armchair near the fire. He was wearing a dark red silk robe tied loosely around his waist. His silver cane leaned against the side of the chair. In his large, rough hand, he held a crystal glass filled with amber liquor. He was staring into the flames, watching them dance, looking completely at peace. Amara stood frozen by the door. The black silk nightgown did nothing to stop the shivers racking her body. Her knees knocked together lightly. She wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. Tae-yoon took a slow sip of his whiskey. He did not turn his head. Come here. His rough, gravelly voice sent a spike of pure terror straight down Amara's spine. She forced her bare feet to move. She limped slowly across the thick, dark rug, trying not to bend her bad knee. She stopped a few feet away from his chair, wrapping her arms tightly across her chest to hide herself. Tae-yoon slowly turned his head. His dark, empty eyes swept up and down her body. He looked at the thin black silk, the dark skin underneath, the tight grip of her arms, and the ugly bruise on her face. His expression did not change. There was no smile, no gentle look, and no immediate hunger. He looked at her like a mechanic examining a car engine. "Drop your arms," he commanded softly. "Please," Amara whispered. Her voice broke on the word. "Please don't do this. I'll clean the whole house. I'll work for free for the rest of my life. Just let me sleep in the basement. You don't have to touch me." Tae-yoon set his crystal glass down on a small wooden table next to his chair. The glass made a sharp, loud clink. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and stared directly into her terrified eyes. "We had this conversation in the car, Amara," he said. His tone was dangerously calm. "I do not repeat myself. You are here to do a job. You are here to secure my legacy. If you fight me, I will make this very painful for you. If you obey, it will be quick and you will go back to your room to sleep. The choice is yours. Now, drop your arms." Amara squeezed her eyes shut. The tears finally spilled over, running hot and fast down her cheeks. She slowly unfolded her arms and let them hang by her sides. She stood there, completely exposed to the cold eyes of the man who owned her. Tae-yoon stood up. He was incredibly tall, towering over her small frame. He did not grab his cane. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her. The heat radiating off his large body felt like a furnace. Amara instinctively took a step back, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Do not move away from me," he warned, taking another step until he was right in front of her. Amara stopped. She was trapped between the blazing fire and his massive chest. She looked down at the floor, unable to look at his face. Tae-yoon raised his hand. His large, rough fingers gently grabbed her chin. His skin was warm and calloused, the hands of a man who had built his empire with violence. He tilted her head up forcefully, making her look at him. His dark eyes locked onto hers. "You are shaking," he stated. "I am scared," she choked out. "You terrify me." "Good," Tae-yoon said softly. "Fear means you understand the reality of your situation. Fear keeps you alive. You should be scared of me. I am not a good man, Amara. I do not care about your feelings, and I do not care about your tears. I only care about the child you are going to give me." His thumb slowly brushed over the dark purple bruise on her cheek. It was a weirdly gentle touch from a man who had just promised to ruin her. Amara flinched slightly, but he held her jaw firmly in place. "Your uncle hit you hard," he murmured, inspecting the swelling. "He was a stupid man to damage something he wanted to sell. I do not damage my property." He let go of her face and stepped past her. He walked over to the massive, king-sized bed in the center of the room. The sheets were dark gray and looked incredibly soft. He pulled the heavy blankets back, exposing the clean white pillows. "Get in," he ordered, his back turned to her. Amara felt like she was walking to her own execution. Her legs felt like they were made of heavy lead. She limped over to the side of the bed and slowly climbed in. The sheets were cold. She pulled them up to her chin, trying to cover the thin silk nightgown. She curled into a tight ball on the far edge of the mattress, staring at the wall, wishing she was dead. Tae-yoon turned off the small lamps on the walls. The only light left in the massive room came from the flickering orange flames of the fireplace. He untied the belt of his red silk robe and let it drop to the floor. Amara squeezed her eyes completely shut, refusing to look at him. She heard the mattress dip heavily behind her as he climbed into the bed. He did not pull her into his arms. He did not try to kiss her or whisper sweet lies into her ear. He rolled her firmly onto her back. Amara gasped, her hands flying up to push against his hard, broad chest. "Stop," he said, catching both of her wrists in one of his massive hands. He pinned her arms above her head with insulting ease. "If you fight, I will tie you to the bed frame. Do you want that?" "No," Amara sobbed, shaking her head frantically against the pillows. "No, please." "Then lie still," he growled low in his throat. He leaned over her, his large body pressing her deep into the soft mattress. The smell of his dark whiskey and expensive cologne completely surrounded her. He was heavy, solid muscle and bone, pressing the air out of her lungs. Amara turned her face away, staring into the dark shadows of the room, biting down hard on her bottom lip to stop herself from screaming. She felt his rough hands slide down her sides, grabbing the thin material of the black nightgown. He did not take it off slowly. He gripped the silk and pulled hard. The delicate fabric ripped down the middle with a sharp, loud, tearing sound. Amara let out a choked cry, but the sound was drowned out by the howling of the Chicago wind hitting the thick glass windows outside. She was completely at his mercy. And Choi Tae-yoon had absolutely none to give. The sharp sound of the ripping silk echoed in the massive, quiet room. Amara squeezed her eyes shut, turning her face away so hard her neck ached. She waited for the pain. She waited for him to hit her or to yell at her like her uncle used to do. But Choi Tae-yoon did not do any of those things. He was completely silent. He moved his large hands up her arms, holding her wrists tightly against the pillows. His grip was like iron, impossible to break, but he did not crush her bones. He hovered over her, his massive chest rising and falling slowly. "Look at me," Tae-yoon ordered. His voice was low and rough, cutting through the crackling sound of the fireplace. Amara kept her eyes glued shut. A fresh hot tear rolled down her bruised cheek, soaking into the dark gray pillowcase. "No," she whimpered, her voice shaking so badly she could barely speak the single word. Tae-yoon shifted his weight. He let go of one of her wrists and used his large, rough fingers to grab her chin. He forced her face back to the center. "I said, look at me. I do not sleep with women who hide like frightened mice. Open your eyes." Amara slowly opened her eyes. Through her blurry tears, she saw his hard, carved face in the orange light of the fire. His dark eyes were intense, completely focused on her. He was not looking at her with love, and he was not looking at her with crazy lust. He was looking at her like a man doing a very serious, very important job. "You are crying for a life you hated," Tae-yoon said softly. His thumbs slowly wiped the tear from her cheek, a weirdly gentle touch that confused her terrified brain. "Your uncle beat you. You cleaned up garbage for pennies. You lived in constant fear of the law. I took all of that away tonight. You belong to a king now. Act like it." He did not kiss her. He did not whisper sweet lies. He simply took what he had paid for. The heavy weight of his body pressed her deep into the mattress, and Amara bit down hard on her own lip to keep from screaming. She stared up at the high, dark ceiling of the master suite, listening to the Chicago wind howl against the thick windows, feeling her old life completely die. If you're hooked on this dark, gritty mafia romance, please leave a like on the video right now. It really helps the algorithm push more intense stories like this straight to your feed. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from today, or rate this episode from 1 to 10. But listen closely. If you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM, you are leaving Amara completely isolated in this massive, freezing mansion with a monster who just claimed her body. She needs an ally. Subscribe now, and let's get back to her story. When Amara finally woke up, the massive bedroom was freezing. The fire in the stone fireplace had burned down to cold gray ashes. The thick, dark gray curtains were pulled tightly shut, blocking out the morning sun, leaving the room in heavy shadows. Amara slowly opened her eyes. Her whole body felt like it had been hit by a truck. Her injured knee throbbed with a dull, heavy ache, and her muscles felt completely stiff. She reached out with a shaking hand. The other side of the giant bed was empty. The sheets were cold. Tae-yoon was already gone. She pulled the thick white blanket up to her chin, breathing in the smell of his dark coffee and expensive cologne that still lingered on the pillows. She felt sick to her stomach. The memory of his heavy hands and cold, empty eyes washed over her, making a fresh wave of tears prick her eyes. She was really trapped. She was just a machine to him. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors clicked loudly. Amara jumped, pulling the blanket tighter around her bare shoulders. Mrs. Kang walked into the room. She was wearing the exact same dark gray dress, her black hair pulled back into the same perfect, tight bun. She carried a large silver tray in her hands. She did not look at the torn pieces of the black silk nightgown lying on the dark rug. She walked straight to the small wooden table near the cold fireplace and set the tray down. "Get up," Mrs. Kang said, her voice sharp and emotionless. "You have slept long enough." Amara slowly sat up, making sure the blanket covered her chest. "What time is it?" she asked. Her voice was scratchy and dry. "It is noon," Mrs. Kang replied. She picked up a thick, white terracloth robe from a chair and threw it onto the foot of the bed. "Put that on. Come eat your food. You will need your strength." Amara carefully slid out of the bed, wincing as her feet hit the cold floor. She pulled the heavy white robe on, tying the belt tightly around her waist. She limped over to the table. On the silver tray was a massive bowl of hot oatmeal with fresh berries, a plate of thick bacon, 2 scrambled eggs, a tall glass of milk, and a small white paper cup holding 3 large pills. "What is that?" Amara asked, pointing a shaking finger at the pills. "I'm not taking drugs." Mrs. Kang let out a short, annoyed sigh. "They are prenatal vitamins. Mr. Choi ordered Dr. Park to get the best ones money can buy. You will take them every single morning. If you do not take them, I will personally hold your nose and force them down your throat. Now eat." Amara stared at the pills. Prenatal vitamins. The reality of what she was supposed to be doing here hit her all over again. He was already preparing her body to grow his child. He was not wasting a single second. She sat down in the large leather chair where Tae-yoon had been sitting the night before. She picked up the silver spoon and forced herself to take a bite of the oatmeal. It was warm and sweet, but she had to force herself to swallow it. Mrs. Kang stood perfectly still, watching her eat every single bite. "Where is he?" Amara asked quietly, not looking up from her bowl. "Mr. Choi is working," Mrs. Kang said flatly. "He runs a very large empire, Amara. He does not sit at home all day babysitting you." "Good," Amara muttered under her breath. Mrs. Kang took a sharp step forward. "Do not speak about the master of this house with disrespect. You think you are suffering? You think your life is so hard? There are thousands of women in this city who would kill to sleep in that bed and eat off that silver tray. You are a street rat who was given a winning lottery ticket. I suggest you learn to be grateful." "Grateful?" Amara snapped, finally looking up. Anger burned through her fear for just a second. "He bought me. He forced me to sleep with him. I don't want his money or his big house. I want to be free." Mrs. Kang actually smiled, but it was a cold, terrifying smile that did not reach her eyes. "Freedom is an illusion, little girl. Everyone is owned by something. You were owned by your uncle's debts and your lack of papers. Now you are owned by Choi Tae-yoon. At least this owner feeds you well." Before Amara could reply, the heavy bedroom doors opened again. Jin, the giant bodyguard, stepped into the room. He wore his usual tight black suit, an earpiece resting in his ear. He looked at Mrs. Kang and nodded once. "The boss wants to see her," Jin grunted. His deep voice echoed in the room. Amara's heart stopped. She looked down at her thick white robe and her bare feet. "Now, I just woke up." "Now," Jin repeated, staring at her with dead eyes. Amara pushed herself out of the chair. Her bad knee twinged with pain, but she ignored it. She followed the giant man out of the master suite and into the long, dark hallway. The house was still completely silent, but today it felt different. It felt heavy. As they walked toward the grand staircase, Amara noticed men standing at the ends of the hallways. They all wore dark suits. They all had cold, serious faces. And she could see the distinct bulge of guns hidden under their jackets. Tae-yoon was not just a rich man. He was a warlord, and this massive stone mansion was his fortress. Jin led her down the stairs and past the dining room. They walked to the back of the house, toward a set of heavy, dark mahogany doors that Amara had not seen before. Jin reached out and pushed the doors open, stepping aside to let her walk in. It was an office. The room was huge, with walls covered entirely in tall bookshelves filled with old, leather-bound books. A massive dark wood desk sat in the center of the room. Behind the desk was a giant window overlooking the frozen, snow-covered backyard. Choi Tae-yoon was sitting behind the desk. He was wearing a sharp, perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit with a crisp white shirt. He did not have a tie on, and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone. He was talking on his sleek black phone, his voice rapid and aggressive in Korean. He saw Amara walk in, but he did not stop talking. He pointed a thick finger at a leather chair in front of his desk. Amara limped over and sat down, pulling the thick white robe tightly over her legs. She watched him while he talked. In the daylight, he looked even more intimidating. The silver hair at his temples made him look distinguished, but the deep lines around his mouth and the harsh cut of his jaw made him look incredibly dangerous. He rubbed his forehead, looking annoyed, and then barked one final, sharp order into the phone before hanging up. He tossed the phone onto the desk. He leaned back in his large leather chair and looked at her. "Did you take the pills?" he asked. His voice was completely flat. Amara swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good." Tae-yoon picked up a heavy gold pen and started turning it slowly between his thick fingers. "I am leaving for the city. I have a problem at the southern docks that requires my personal attention. Some stupid men think because I am getting older, they can steal my cargo without consequences. I will be gone for 2 days to remind them who owns Chicago." Amara's heart did a tiny, hopeful flip in her chest. 2 days without him. 2 days where she wouldn't have to go into that freezing master suite and let him touch her. Tae-yoon saw her face change. He let out a dark, knowing chuckle. "Do not look so happy, Amara. Just because I am not in the house does not mean you are unsupervised. Jin is staying here. He will sleep outside your door. Mrs. Kang will bring you your meals. You are not allowed to leave the second floor." "I can't even go downstairs," Amara asked, her voice rising in frustration. "You're keeping me locked in a single hallway like an animal." Tae-yoon leaned forward, resting his heavy arms on the desk. "You are not an animal. You are a very expensive, very important investment. And until there is a child growing inside your stomach, you are a flight risk. I do not trust you, and you do not like me, so we will use locks." "This is sick," Amara whispered, tears of pure anger building in her eyes. "You can't do this to me. Please, just let me go. I won't tell the police anything. I don't know anything anyway. I just want to go back to my life." Tae-yoon stood up slowly. He grabbed his silver-handled cane and walked around the massive desk. Amara shrank back into the leather chair as he approached her. He stopped right in front of her, towering over her. "Your life is gone," he said softly, but the words hit like a hammer. "Your uncle sold your passport to me. He took the $50,000 and left the city. He is gone. Your tiny, cold apartment was rented to someone else this morning. I had my men clear it out. Your cheap clothes are currently burning in an incinerator at my warehouse." Amara stopped breathing. You burned my things." "You do not need them," Tae-yoon said. He reached down and grabbed the collar of her thick white robe, pulling her slightly forward so she was forced to look directly into his terrifying black eyes. "You are Amara Choi now. You are the mother of my future heir. You will sleep in my bed, you will eat my food, and you will wear the clothes I buy for you. If you try to run while I am gone, Jin will break your good leg and drag you back here. Do we understand each other?" Amara stared at the monster holding her. He had systematically destroyed every single piece of her old life in less than 24 hours. She had absolutely nothing left in the world except the clothes on her back and the cold, terrifying man standing in front of her. "Yes," she whispered, a single tear falling down her cheek. "Say it so I believe you," he growled, giving her robe a slight shake. "I understand," Amara cried out, her voice breaking into a sob. "I understand. I won't run, just leave me alone." Tae-yoon stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then, slowly, he let go of her robe. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He dropped it into her lap. "Dry your face," he said coldly. "I will be back in 2 days. When I return, I expect you to be ready." He turned his back on her and walked out of the massive office, his cane tapping rhythmically against the hardwood floor. Amara sat alone in the giant chair, clutching the white cloth in her shaking hands, crying for the life that had been completely erased.